Hello, this is Kuzcopia, and you're listening to the creative process on the topic of story impact. Today, we will be using an entirely different format. It will be mainly a plot analysis of a work in order to show exactly how story impact comes about. And I will be using a work that has undeniably, undisputably impacted the entire world. I am talking about V for Vendetta. I know, Wachowskis, let's calm down and I will prove all of this to you. I promise. The movie you get on Netflix, if you look for V for Vendetta, is one that has the very iconic mask of the protagonist for V for Vendetta, which is a Guy Fawkes mask. It's called We Are Legion, and it is about the organization Anonymous, which is one of many popular endeavors that erupted using imagery and behavioral patterns that they got from this movie, and not to mention ideologies and thoughts that came from this movie. I will not be talking about the comic book. I have not read the comic book. I didn't read it before the movie came out, and I decided not to read it so it wouldn't influence my analysis of the movie. And so I don't know if the impact is strictly the responsibility of the Wachowskis or if it actually comes from the original graphic novel and the writer of the writers. All right. So we are going to just go over the movie, go over the story, the plot, how it unraveled, and I will try and explain exactly how this happened. Meanwhile, you will be able to see critics' reviews, because critics on Rotten Tomatoes gave this movie 71 out of 100, and I will be showing just what movies are comparable. According to these critics, what movies are comparable to V for Vendetta. So we start out with Fawkes, Guy Fawkes. And the plot asks, what was he like? Why did he do it? And completely, basically introduces the movie with viable interest in what is essentially a terrorist. It quotes the power of ideas, how it drives people to kill for them and die for them, but that at the end of the day, we don't really care about ideas like we care about people. And I think this is talking about why they are so hard to actually move people. Ideas, I mean. As much as they're undisputably immortal, and that the movie will tackle that as well, they are really hard to move people. Because people are more emotionally drawn to other people and not like abstract concepts. But the movie does start with a viable interest in a terrorist, which is by itself very edgy, so to speak. And then it gets off to the actual opening, with the TV blowhard and both protagonists, V and Evie, getting ready. And the way they shoot this would be the way that it probably was written. It introduces an immediate connection where they're both getting ready to go out, and they both go out at the same time, and they both shut off the TV, the blowhard at the same time, reacting the same way. It introduces an immediate connection between the two. So then comes the scene where they meet. I mean, she gets accosted by these rapists. It's such a typical scene, but it's used to their benefit. So they introduce themselves, and it is important to note that he, V, is by far his most verbose self at the introduction. Like, he's never this out there again with the way he talks and the way he speaks, because he doesn't need to, due to this very important and very impactful first impression. And cleverness. I'm just remarking upon the fact of asking a masked man who he is. All right. Like, that was really clever. So, Then they walk up and you get the explosions, and it's revealed that the protagonist, V, is a terrorist, and he talks about it. Like what it means, what drives it. But it is important to note as well that on this introduction, there are no body bags. Like no people dying with the explosion, and even the guys, the rapists that he saved Evie from, do not get killed. It is important, like, note that he will actively kill in every other confrontation without a moment's hesitation. He just didn't at the start, because the writers didn't want the audience to oppose him, like, right off the bat. They needed him to have that dialogue about what drives him, and they needed what comes next, which is this fascist, super fascist screen in front of like a table of shady people in the dark, planning a political spin and a media spin that just, well, resonates with everyone, really. And it's an ongoing theme. But after the writers present this, then it's okay for V to start killing people. But before would be too dangerous. It could ruin the flow of the plot line and the weight of the plot anchors that are the characters and their motivations and how much you care about them, right? In order to counter this, V needs to steal, needs to go into a TV station and do the broadcast that he does to say that, no, I blew up the building, not the slide that they're spinning, and blah, 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 and blah, blah, and give the great speech that he gives that is so important to so many people. Like, he says so much, so it hits hard. But he needs to do that. So the writers needed to, basically there's little flexibility to what V needed to do, but there is flexibility with Evie. Because all she needs to go to, like, they don't need her exactly to do anything. They just need her to be wherever he's going to be. So they put her working at the TV station so that they have the timing and location to connect them together. And this has no issue because, I mean, all we've seen is her going out and about during the evening, so she can have any job. Like, it doesn't seem weird to anyone that she's there. So this TV scene actually, like, is when everyone finds out that this isn't a regular superhero movie. Going again, it gets very real with the things he says, and it also introduces the audience to who V's enemies are. Once that is understood, again, the terrorists may now kill their soldiers, because now people identify V's enemies as this fascist regime, and the soldiers as fascist soldiers, so it's okay for V to kill them, even if they're police officers. It's okay in the sense that it won't lose the audience support. Despite that, it will still struggle a lot with how monstrous it all is. But where we realize that this isn't just a normal, funny superhero flick is exactly on the speech itself that he gives. When he talks about, like, I understand why you did it. You were afraid. You sought the path of comfort and convenience and all of that. Oof. Man, I'm not gonna ruin the speech by trying to ad-lib it here. Just watch the movie. It's amazing. All right, so the detectives following Evie is actually a good another good plot point and plot anchor. Like, because of the previous explosion, they find out about her because of her encounter with the other rapists, which were cops. They found about her. They find out where she works, so they are there to catch V unawares and to force Evie to make a choice on whether she helps V or not. She does. If the detectives weren't there, she wouldn't be forced to help V. She would have just run away with the crowd initially. But then, I mean, very believably so, she gets knocked out, V needs to make a choice, and the people will understand even before he explains why he decides to save her. So everything is just like all the plot points, the plot anchors, neatly are carrying our plot line around across out of this first act and into the second act. I consider that the second act starts here when we switch to V's lair. Now, first off, there's this scene where they just talk about why he took her and what's gonna happen to her. And then there's this scene with the detectives where they go over her past. But that's really not, I mean, that's just to make the relationship seem more organic and natural. What matters is the scene that comes after, immediately after, which is still kind of an introduction to the whole thing, which is when she wakes up and then deals with him in a more friendly manner, in a more calm demeanor. Here we get character development around more perspective on what is essentially terrorism. One of the best ways in which you can see how a story impacts, everyone remembers people should not be afraid of their governments, governments should be afraid of their people, and this happens in this scene, like right off the bat, start of second act, let's go. Because the other, like all the V's, alliteration, and the speech, all of that is really good, but people don't remember it off the top of their heads. But if you say that line, governments should be afraid of their people, you know, people will remember this movie. So, we switch to Finch, the detective, waking up in the bed, showing a tired, vulnerable way of carrying himself, which is the way through which he solidifies in the audience's eyes as a third protagonist, or at least as a third point of view on the story, as a main agent of action, of moving the plot forward. And he indeed, that's what happens. Like, we see most of the plot unraveling through Finch's eyes, because all of it is connected with the mystery behind V, which I'm getting ahead of myself. So, we do get introduced to Finch because V went and killed the blowhard. So V took Evie's ID to kill the media blowhard, and that puts the detectives on the money trail to uncovering V's past. It becomes then increasingly obvious that the plot is closely tied to V's background and to uncovering it through all of this. And all interwoven, I like that word, all interwoven with the topic of vengeance, which first introduces itself into the plot when they're watching Monte Cristo, the Count of Monte Cristo. So at this point, she finds out that her ID was stolen. And that's actually a funny scene, because she finds out because she sees a news report of the blowhard having been killed, and she's looking at this news reporter, and Evie says, she's lying, I can tell because she blinks a lot when she's lying. And almost immediately the news reporter goes like,
"You will be sorely missed,"
and blinks. It's a little bit, it really is the small things sometimes. I really think it's funny. Anyway, so she finds out about this, and she decides to try and escape V because she's afraid of him. And beforehand, in the scene when they were talking and having some relationships, she talked about wanting to be an actress and stuff. No, actually, it's in the scene. Sorry, she decides to escape, so she talks to him, and she uses like a bonding moment to tell him to use her to help him on his next, gig, whatever job, his next attempt, on the next time he goes out. And during that, she says she's an actress, which is exactly the detail that convinces him to use her, because he will want to use her as an actress. And it's also in this scene that she delivers her father's line about writers using lies to tell the truth, which is... Man, like, I didn't remember this line when I went to rewatch the movie, but now it's my favorite line in the movie just because of how I relate to it. Like, it really... And I love it because it's super meaningful, and at the same time, it severely impacts character development on both sides. And we'll see that later. But if you know the movie well enough, you know what I'm talking about, but this will come back to her. But it's a great line. Writers use lies to tell the truth, while politicians use the truth to tell lies. No, use lies to hide the truth. That's what they say. Anyway, so she escapes after, like, they kill the priest guy that tries to sexually harass her and whatever, and she escapes. Like that just happens. I mean, it's just showing that V is really going after people and killing them. And she escapes him, however, and escapes out to Gordon's house. And where they immediately reveal why Gordon wouldn't just sell her out, because the viewer, the audience needs to understand, in this nation of fear, why wouldn't just Gordon sell her out? And we find out that it's because, you know, he's gay, has a copy of the Quran, and there's this whole scene, and it all flows really well because she's worried about him, and he's like, no, and he says, you're the least of my worries, and she's like, what do you mean? And then he goes and shows her, and he's showing her why she's the least of his worries, but actually he's showing the audience why we can feel at ease, that she can really trust him, you know? So, I mean, it's just, I'm always amazed at how well this all follows. I mean, we go from this one to the botanist scene, to the woman, right, that gets the rose from the detective, and she looks at the rose, and then you see that she recognizes the rose, and it's like, holy crap. And the whole scene where V goes to kill her is very sincere, and heartfelt. Not just because of the actors, but because of what they say and what they say to each other. But of course, like, the acting helps. I love also a line here where he says, like, it's not about what you hope to do, but what you actually did. You know, like, they focus a lot on this scene that it's about consequences being met according to her actions, no matter her intentions. And I love that. And then there's also when she asks, like, is there any meaning to apologizing? And he says, always, which I think is also very powerful. It's just like a really powerful scene. And there's like a weight and a history behind all of these characters that immediately gets revealed when the detective reads the diary. And we see the plot advancing as V's backstory is revealed. The fluidity of the plot line is just amazing. Like, I really think it's just, this plot writing is some of the best we will ever see. And it's not even without actually good writing. Like, it's well written, and it even has a bit of poetic flair. Like how V was prisoner 5 with Roman numerals, and that's why he calls himself V. Like, he never has to explain that. He doesn't, like, Evie never asks, he never explains that to her or anyone. We just, like, the way they show it. Of course, this only works in the movie. In the book format, it would have to be worked differently. But he was inside of a room with a 5 Roman numeral, and that's why he's called V. And he broke out on the 5th of November. You know, it's all coming together as to why the whole plot is about the Guy Fawkes and all of that. You know, because the way V feels about destiny, you can then figure out about his character. Like, he chose a Guy Fawkes mask because he got out on the 5th of November, and 5th of November is the date where Guy Fawkes and blah, 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 you know. So we circle back to the detectives with all of V's background revealed. And the revelation that there is more to the story than that. There's more to the mystery than V's background, because there's the mystery of whatever was going on at the facility where he was being held, and whatever this business of the virus is. And there's this, followed by a scene that is again super important, where the detective, like, asks 3 times, putting different weights into the way that he's asking these questions. He asks 3 times, like, if the government was behind something like this, would you really like to know? And the way it's written and the way the scene is shot, I really feel like the question is being made to the audience, and that's exactly what a story is supposed to do. The story is supposed to, like, the characters are going through these things, but in actuality, I'm trying to make you go through these things and you consider these things. And the question is, like, would you really like to know about this scandal? Because there's ramifications to knowing. There's how you will feel that you need to act, how you will feel not taking action, how you will feel knowing that you can't take action. There's a lot of ramifications to this, and sometimes people just do not want to know. But I like that this guy actually does want to know, and these detectives are actually friendly with each other. There's no backstab by this second cop, and I thought that was really good, because like they could have just had this second cop be like, yeah, totally, I want to know, and then he goes behind the detective's back and tells on him, and there's this whole thing, you know, that could add a lot of drama. And there's a lot of times writers put that into their plots because they think it will add, but there's really situations when they detract. And the fact that these guys are actually loyal and just literally spend all their movie just doing their jobs, just being good at their jobs and doing their best inside a very legitimate moral code is why they're so likable, and why like you really have no problem having the detective as a third person view. Anyway, I like the fact because we go out of that tense "would you really like to know" directly into signs of sedition in the streets, followed by Gordon's comedy show, also like a sign of rebellion, you know. Then we get the black bag, which mirrors back to Evie's past experience with her parents. And then she tries to escape but gets captured, right? And that is when we start Evie's final steps in her character development. And I like that it makes complete sense why V would do that. It's not only due to the fact that he loves her, which will come about as a revelation later, but like he does care about her, like we know that much. But the fact is, she knows, he says in the beginning, like, you know the color of the stone, you know it's in the ground, that's enough for people to find me out, right? So he needs to retrieve her. But she already tried to escape. So what he does to her, even though it's later spinned as a necessary transformation measure, it also makes sense from a necessity kind of thing. Because if she breaks during the interrogation, during the torture, and tells on V can just say, okay, I really can't trust you. Now you're locked in here. I'll lock you, I'll let you out on the 5th of November when everything is done for and you can't stop me, then I'll let you out. But if it works, then it's even better. You know, like it's really like just the best thing he could do from a logistics and a planning point of view. This scene, although it's a collection of scenes really, this sub-arc, mini-arc, I don't know. So this portion of the movie not only grows Evie as a character, but also creates an even stronger connection between her and V, because she is essentially going through his experience. And before the final reveal that this is exactly what is happening, you can tell in the movie by two ways. I'm just going to say this out of curiosity because I caught it. So, one, if you know Hugo Weaving is the actor portraying V, then you will clearly see that it's him talking to her in the interrogation scenes. Two, you might remember the focal background character during the journal reading, like during when the detective Finch is going over the botanist's journal, and they flash back to the days when she was a scientist and killing all these people. There's a focus on this background character that you see here. That is exactly the writer of these toilet paper letters that she would write. And I mean, this whole thing is pretty nice. And the final confrontation at the end is pretty amazing, though that I have to give most of the credit on how well that scene goes. Like when she comes out and she's like, "You tortured me, you blah 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 blah," and they go back and forth, and she has a nervous breakdown, and she goes up to the roof under the rain and yells and stuff, and there's this bonding. Very aggressive, very emotional bonding between them. The scene is really, like 80% of the impact of that scene is really on the actors. Like Natalie freaking nails the whole thing, you know. And the way that her nervous breakdown is dealt with when he says, you have no fear anymore, you're completely free. is really the most important and impactful thing that he could say to her. And also is the centerpiece behind the story. Not the plot, but the story. And all of this on top of throwing her father's line at her. Using lies to tell the truth, right? Because that's what he just did. He used the lie that she was actually captured by the government to tell the truth, which is that she was really capable of caring about something else other than her own life. And that is really, that's the declaration of intent from the point of the story writing. Like, good stories always do that, I think. Before they nail it down, they show you the nail. And they size up the board, and you can see what they want to nail down, you know? So they show you the nail with government should be afraid of their people line. And now they placed it on the board. And they're lining up the first hit to nail it down. And you're really beginning to see and to feel that the story is about the effects of fear on society and on the characters, and how it really is the driving force of the main character motivations that drive the entire plot. They hammer it for the first time immediately afterwards, as Sutherland orders a fear campaign to be launched. So if there was any doubts that fear was going to be a centerpiece in this display, that is this story, then at this point the audience is pretty much aware and on board of this. When Sutherland gives this huge rant on how he wants like everyone to fear, and then you see all these scenes of news reports just like floods, disease, economical breakdown, etc., 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 etc. It's really well done because, again, it feels very familiar. If you've ever watched the news, it feels very familiar. So we go from there to Finch meeting V, thinking he's an informant. And it's at this point that the mystery about the virus gets completely solved for the audience. Wait, what? How come? Because as I said, they already introduced the actual story, which is the fear and the goal of getting all of these members, Sutherland to start with, but also Macready, which gets validated in the scene immediately following Finch, because V tells Finch to put Macready under surveillance, and immediately after he meets with Macready and uses that surveillance to screw with his head, in showing the audience that his end plan is vengeance. Just in case there's any doubts, there's a cut to Evie watching Monte Cristo again. Just in case you forgot the name of the actual movie, Vendetta, Vengeance. This is about V getting his full-on revenge. And meanwhile, the story is about fear. So at this point, everything is right there in front of us. And thus begins what I believe is the third act. And this is one of, if not the most perfect transition in a movie I have ever seen to a third act. I'm talking about the domino scene backed by societal events unfolding as he planned, backed by a great narration by Detective Finch, all on top of the theme of fear, just driving Macready to do this and driving the people to do that and driving the cop to shoot the kid and the guys to react to the cop, and all of this happening as this huge domino structure is being set up, and Finch is narrating, and then Finch goes like, someone will make him in the midst of all this chaos and fear. It doesn't say fear, but someone will do something stupid, and then bow, V hits the domino piece, and you see the whole thing unraveling, and it's amazing. And it even has that blocked piece, and V walks up and lifts the blocked piece. And I don't know about you guys, but I talked to other people, but I had the sense, without nobody telling me, that was going to be Evie. The piece represented Evie. And that comes from the natural inclination of people knowing that Evie's contribution to the plotline couldn't just be growing as a person. Like, you rarely just... The story is rarely just about the character development. The character develops for reasons that cause the story to impact, but for also a purpose inside of the plot, or that relates to the goal, to the final goal of the ending. And so when you lift the blocked piece, and in your brain, because the entire plotline, this is what I always mean by these things are subjectively inside the audience's mind, because I really think this is a fact. The entire plotline, even if I'm not visualizing it because I'm watching a movie and I'm entertained, the entire plotline is in my head. And when he lifts that piece that blocked the entire domino cascade, and you see that MacReady is doing everything V wants, Finch is doing everything V wants, everyone is doing everything as V wants, and everything is converging to the final plan. There's only one missing piece in this plot that has shaped in front of you, and that is, what role does Evie actually play in this overall plan, in the finale, in the ending that is coming? What role does Evie play? Because everyone else played their role to guarantee that finale, but what role does Evie play? And knowing that V wishes to explode the building, there's also that. So I really think most people will get the sense that that piece that blocks the entire domino cascade represents Evie. And V is having that exact same conclusion. We're in it with him. Like, when that happens is when he decides, I'm going to give the choice to blow the building for Evie. And the way he frames that is actually very good, because when they had their freak out after she escapes from the torture chamber, she says that he's a monster, he goes around killing people, he's a monster, because he says, like, I am what they made me, you know, what they did to me was monstrous, and she says, and they created a monster, and that actually hits him, and you see that. And so he seems to decide that, and he indicates as much, that he didn't want that action to be done in the name of revenge and in the name of him who was about to die, because he was pretty sure he was about to die when he went to meet with MacReady. He wanted that action to be made by Evie's idealism. And this is extremely important, because every other character in the movie, other than V, represents the audience. Everyone is either in MacReady's shoes, Finch's shoes, the blowhard, Gordon, all the randoms that will be using masks in the scene very soon to happen, or Evie. But V, nobody is supposed to put themselves in the position of V, because he's in a way superpowered, talks in a way that nobody does. And what is important for the plot to show, for the story to show, is that the idealism that was driving V to these actions, that's terrorist actions essentially, can be transferred to us, to other people, and can be understood. And that's why Finch even accepts Evie's, we'll get to that. But it is important for V to not do it in the name of revenge, but in the name of idealism, which only Evie could represent as someone who didn't go through everything that V had gone through. Because V admits that he's completely blindsided. And this actually goes towards the one weakness that the story has. And I'll touch on it when we get to the scene, because first he goes through the tunnel and he has this confrontation with MacReady and Sutherland, which is fantastic. The fight is awesome. The lines are absolutely amazing. Like, the fact that Sutherland dies a pathetic death prompts MacReady to quote fear again. You know, you're not afraid, you're like me, you have no fear, etc. And then the fight against MacReady, in which we get the other line, ideas are bulletproof, which is very amazingly delivered. It flows off the script, like the interaction between them. I mean, he's being shot and he's being survived, and he's like, "Why won't you die?" You know, and he's saying, and V goes and says that, and ideas are bulletproof is the other big quote that everybody knows is from this movie. When someone says ideas are bulletproof, they think of V for Vendetta. Anyone who has ever watched this movie will remember V for Vendetta. If they hear ideas are bulletproof and people should not be afraid of the government should be afraid of their people, amongst others. But I feel these two specifically are very powerful. So he leaves and goes to Evie, and they have their last goodbye. So love overall, he gives this speech about you made me feel love. I fell in love. I knew nothing but revenge, but then I met you and I fell in love. Because it's the Wachowskis, and if there's one thing that the Wachowskis always have, is a message against the system. It's very literal in the Matrix. And love as the centerpiece that moves everything. I think, like, you watch any other movie than V for Vendetta, and love is at the center of all the plot. It's what moves the main characters. It's behind most every important decision. It's the main plot anchor at every plot point. So they really can't help themselves but to put love here, and I think this is the one weakness. Because he says that I was just revenge, and I was all but revenge, and I was completely consumed by it, but then I met you and I fell in love, Evie. But the thing is, if that was true, he wouldn't have gone to the tunnel, because just before the tunnel, she like kisses him and says you don't have to go, and he's tempted to pick love, but then he says I can't, and just goes, and there's a feeling of he really wants to let it go. He really wants happiness instead of revenge, but it's just impossible for him. He's too wrapped up in it, like the Count of Monte Cristo. In his story, and which is not reflected in the movie that they show in the movie, but the actual story. And I really like that, and I think that him saying that he loves her, I think that's cool. Like saying like, I fell in love with you, you made me feel, you made me blah blah blah. But that line where he says I was all revenge, but then I met you, really accidentally indicates something that goes in opposition with his decision to go down the tunnel to get his revenge. And that is the one weakness that we can totally just brush past. But that is the one weakness. I just don't want you guys to think that I'm just fibbing for this movie. I do think it has a weakness here, but it really is the only one, plot-wise at least. Okay. So then we see the crowd of people, another great scene where we just see these people. I think it's important from the plot point that the generals don't actually have anyone sitting on an ivory tower, unfeeling and unscrupulous, just telling them to open fire on the people. It's important because you need that. Because if Sutherland was there, he would say, open fire, and they would shoot over the people. Right? But the message of the movie is not that. The message of the movie is people shouldn't be afraid of their governments. So it wouldn't be very conducive. And the way that the plot unraveled and the way that V just killed them all left the soldiers without an upper chain of command, which tells another very short message that these soldiers who would undoubtedly commit great atrocities just don't when they're not told to. Because they're there. They're looking these people in the faces, kind of, because they're wearing masks, and they just can't bring themselves to open fire. But then I like that the camera pulls back, and you think like, man, even if the soldiers try to fire on them, look at how many they are. And that's another part that I like about this scene. Because you're thinking like they should be afraid of their guns. Oh, okay, they don't have the leader, so they're not going to open fire. And that's the only reason why they're, oh, holy crap, wait, there's a lot of them. Whoa, the government should be afraid of their people. Look at how many they are. You know, that's amazing. Whew. And that's the entire end of the story. It just ends there. There's the scene with Evie and Finch, but this is the big Like, the big end to the plot is when V gets the revenge and gives Evie the choice. That's the end of the plot. Because like the plot line ends there. Because once that is done, like the plot line ends. The story doesn't. The movie doesn't. The writing would not done. But if you were drawing the plot line, it would end there when V kills them both, Sutherland and McCreely. Because everything else is already not being written, in the sense that people show up and they're there and the explosion goes, you know? And of course it's important from a plot, like it's important that Evie makes the choice that she does, but that's just story. To me, like, that is just the finale of the story. That is the choice of what is right, of idealism, of freedom over fear. The choice. Now, if you really start analyzing the whole thing philosophically, it's not that perfect, because they did need V to take out the entire power structure of the country to pull this off, which is not something you can ever apply to the real world. But when Evie says, like, this country needs more than a building, followed by the callback to asking Finch if he likes music. Do you like music? It's going all the way around. Again, bringing up the fact that Evie is now 100% on V's page. It all came full circle, and now she's at where he was when he blew up the statue at the beginning. The idealism has completely transferred from him to her. The lack of fear, the ideas. And that's the scene that we end with the explosion. Because then they talk about who was he, you know? And she's like, he was everyone, he was me, he was you, he was everyone. And that's how the story ends, right? With all of us being the anonymous people that start unmasking to drive home the point. As far as even showing dead people, you know, we end on that scene on the fact that people are no longer afraid because they have hope. And so they take their masks off. They no longer need to be anonymous. It's amazing. It's an amazing movie. And the fluidity, flexibility, and engineering of the plotline is a great reason why this product has impact. But it also cannot be unsaid that it's everything else. Like I said before, executing a work like this involves a lot of talents. The actors were great, the scenes were great, cinematography, everything was fantastic. Why this movie has the same score? I'm not gonna go there. I don't wanna ruin this tribute with hate. But V for Vendetta is an amazing movie. Please watch it from a standpoint of so edgy. Oh my gosh. Like it's really not about that. I know a lot of people have taken this Guy Fawkes mask and this Anonymous and this anti-establishmentarianism thing to stupid, funny parody levels. But you cannot deny that the movie made an impact. When untold numbers of people, like the Guy Fawkes mask, became a mainstream thing, became a thing that people are, you know, one more product that some kids are being slaved off to build somewhere in China or whatever. Like it is a phenomenon. It is something like Pokemon Go was recognized as a phenomenon, but V for Vendetta was never. Anonymous popped up with the Guy Fawkes mask, you know. Everybody knew where that was from, but nobody ever talked about it. The critics never raved about this movie like they rave about others. About the artistry, but mostly about the writing, about the way that this whole thing is interwoven like a big, beautiful piece of clothing. No, piece of tapestry, like a beautiful piece of tapestry. This thing is woven and drives the point home from the beginning to the ends, using very few subplots, using very good character developments, great cast, great music. Music is also really good. But we here, I here at the creative process mostly focus on story writing, and the story writing on this movie, on this production, the plot writing and the story itself is really good, and it's why it's really impactful. It's not because V goes on a tirade at the beginning with all the alliterations. It's not because, oh, he's so edgy, because a lot of things are edgy. You got Mr. Robot nowadays, for example. Like, a lot of stuff is edgy, tries to be edgy, always tried to be edgy. But this thing, I mean, think about it. It's a movie that opens up with a terrorist in 2006. And it's a movie about a terrorist. And he's actually out there killing people. And most people watching the movie are completely on board with V and know where he's coming from. And are completely on board with Evie and Finch when they decide to send the train to blow up the parliament. Because this country needs more than a building right now, it needs hope. At which point, again, they start unmasking themselves because they have hope. And so they don't need to fear anymore. And that is an amazing thing. It just nails it so hard. Like, whatever you think about the Wachowskis over Jupiter Ascended, and I mean, it's funny to me that they do the Matrix and then they do this and then they put them on the Street Racer. Speed Racer, sorry, and then they're like Speed Racer. I was like, what? But even there, they were like, the plot is all about how every sport is completely rigged. They're always against the system. Like, whatever you want to do or say, I think it's really, I mean, you gotta give them. Jupiter Ascending, I think it's a pretty inferior story compared to V for Vendetta, like, absolutely. But it's still about, like, these monopolistic 1%ers, let's call them, just for this, just because we gotta call them something. Just using poor people as cattle. Sorry, but it does have that. That's the main theme of the damn movie. It just gets sidelined by the love story, which, you know, like all of their movies, except I think, like, I only watched Speed Racer 1. I think it doesn't happen there. So, except for V for Vendetta and Speed Racer, and potentially some other movie I haven't watched from them, all their stories get sidelined by the love story that's going on. Although they are about the love story, like Neo and Trinity and all that list's characters, I don't remember them. Sorry. And Jupiter Shanning's Mia and the dog. Remember? Sorry. All right. I'm losing control. I'm going into territory that I haven't prepared for. V for Vendetta, great impact. I hope that I helped you understand why it created such impact and what you can look out for in future movies or in movies that you like. Maybe you now you can rewatch a movie that you really like and you can never explain why and see exactly why, because most likely it's just really a solid plot that's behind it. Even if it's a comedy, you know? Most likely. Maybe not. You know? Maybe you like stuff like Sausage Party, I don't know. Anyway. Oh gosh. Oh. Thank you for listening. This has been Kuzcopia on the creative process on the topic of story impact using a plot analysis of V for Vendetta, the movie adaptation by the great Wachowski siblings. Yeah, I was saying brothers, right? Sorry, that changed. Siblings. Thank you for watching and have a great week.